The flute is really like no other woodwind instrument in terms of tone production. You can see the similarities between a clarinet and a sax, or you can see the similarities between an oboe and bassoon, albeit they are different in their own way. But the flute stands out by itself, and us flute players, if we're not taught by a flute specialist, it can be quite difficult to troubleshoot our tone production, particularly in the early stages. And I have been asked by a non-flute specialist who very successfully teaches woodwind, why are my flute players not making a focused and clear sound? So let me help with troubleshooting that in the early stages. So we have lots of muscles round about our lips here that all go towards producing the perfect shape. Lots of information that you get tells you that you should be covering this amount of the hole, you should do this, do that with your lips, but for goodness sake, we're not all the same. Our lips are different sizes, different shapes, and so it's different for everybody, and actually only experience can tell you, yeah, that needs moved up your lip a little bit or turned out or whatever. So there's just a few things that you can check. So number one, okay, it's quite difficult for me to demonstrate this because I've only got my lips, and obviously I've been playing for quite a long time, so my lips will naturally go to the place that it wants to sound. But the first thing you should look at is, have you got too much bottom lip covering the hole? So when you put your flute to your lip, if we have too much of the red part of your lip getting in the way, then it restricts where the air should go. So the general advice is about a third of your the red part of your lip to cover the hole. But you will have to just experiment with bringing it up and down your lip to find the optimum place for you to blow. So just be careful you've not got too much of your bottom lip covering the hole. Number two, you need to have a look at the size of the aperture. In other words, the opening that's allowing the air to come out. Often with beginner players, it's too large and lets out too much air. That makes it really difficult for the air to be directed to the right place, and often the air becomes too high. So narrow the aperture down. The difficulty is that you don't want to squeeze too much air. It needs to be firm to hold that lip shape without squeezing tightly. If you can think of spitting rice, a little grain of rice in between your lips, that's a good starting place, and start from there and then begin to open it up little by little, but really a tiny amount. Number three, this one is kind of not negotiable at the beginning, and that is to make sure that the hole is on top of your flute. So it is finely balanced, your flute, so that all the key work in the mechanism, if the keys sit on top, and if you're absolutely in line, you have the embouchure hole in line with the key work, then that gives you the best balance there, and the hole should sit on top. If you roll it in, it makes the distance between your top lip and the outer edge of your flute too short. It makes your octave short, and it makes your sound very, very squashed. Conversely, if you're too far turned out, this is often where we lose far too much air and it becomes a really airy sound. So you want to just make sure that you find that this is sitting on top, unless you've got something very specific going on with your flute playing where you might adjust this in time. But for beginners, it's not negotiable. Have your flute perfectly in line, check it carefully. The tiniest amount will make a difference, and make sure that that hole is absolutely on top of the tube. So those three things should help you to troubleshoot any issues where you've got an unfocused sound. You don't want to be too tight and too crystal clear if you're right at the beginning of your flute playing, because that would suggest that you're squashing here. And of course, good breath control and good support will allow the best sound. Try those three things. There are other things too, but these are the most common things that I come across, and the first things that we go to help produce that early sound.